Alright, so in this example, we're going to find the zeros of this polynomial function. The zeros are the same thing as solving this polynomial equals 0. So, to find those, we need to first find a number that makes this 0. Our possible choices are plus and minus the factors of 2, which are 1 and 2, divided by the factors of the leading coefficient, which are 1. So in other words, our possible zeros are plus and minus 1 and plus and minus 2. So let's start out with 1. That's pretty easy. We get 1 plus 1 is 2, plus negative 2 is 0. When I plug in 1 here, we get minus 1 plus 1. That's also 0. So we see that just kind of doing it in our head, 1 is a 0. So let's divide 1 into this. And again, really, the factor that goes with that is x minus 1. Because when I factor out the x minus 1, and when I plug in 1 there, it makes it 0. So anyways, back to doing this synthetically. We write down the coefficients, 1, 1, negative 1, 1, and negative 2. Start by bringing down the first number, bring down the 1. Multiply, 1 times 1 is 1. Add, you get 2. 2 times 1 is 2. Add, we get 1. 1 times 1 is 1. Add, we get 2. 2 times 1 is 2, and we get a remainder of 0, which is what we would expect because 1 is a 0. So, that means this factors to x minus 1 times x cubed plus 2x squared plus x plus 2 is what that factors to. Well, we got to keep factoring until we can find all the solutions. So now we need to figure out what is, keep in mind this is really saying x, well it's right here. This is the same thing as this. So now we know that the number we plug in there has to be negative in order to get 0, because everything's added together. The only way we can get it a 0 is if some of those numbers are negative, which means our answer's got to be negative. What if I plug in negative 1? Does negative 1 work? It does not. When I plug in negative 1, that is not 0. Right? Well, let's try 2. Negative 2, I mean. When I plug in negative 2 cubed is negative 8. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4 times 2 is positive 8. And then we get minus 2 plus 2. Sure enough, that does add up to 0. So that means negative 2 is a 0. So let's divide negative 2 into this, which is the same as dividing negative 2 into this. Again, what do? Bring down the 1. Multiply, 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Add, we get 0. 0 times negative 2 is 0. Add, we get 1. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Add, we get 0. We would expect a remainder of 0. So this means this is equal to x minus 1. Like we said, one of the zeros of this is negative 2. So that means one of the factors of this is x plus 2. Because when I plug negative 2 into that factor is 0. And then we're left with x squared plus x plus 1. Or, x squared plus 0x plus 1, or x squared plus 1. So we know one solution is 1. Another solution is negative 2. What are the solution? When is this factor 0? So we have the zeros are 1, negative 2, and now we got to figure out when is this 0. Well, x squared plus 1 equals 0. If I subtract 1 from both sides, we get x squared equals negative 1. Take the square root of both sides, and don't forget your plus and minus when you take the square root of a square. You get the square root of negative 1 but the square root of negative 1 is I, so we get plus and minus I. So that means the other two solutions, the other two zeros, are plus and minus I. So there's 4 answers here, which makes sense. We would expect 4 answers because this is a 4th degree polynomial. If this was an x cubed, a 3rd degree polynomial, we better get 3 answers. Yeah? And that's just the way it works. So that's the idea of how we find the zeros of a polynomial function.